remember actually sitting in a room just like this, and if the environment wasn't heavy enough with the people at the table with me, 2 detectives, a special investigator from the prosecutor's office, and a state trooper. And I had been escorted into this room where they were about to reveal to me the devastation of what I had just caused. Only 8 hours after I had been responsible for an at-fault drunk driving fatality. And it was in that very room where the devastation that I had caused had come to a climax. They had confirmed that there was a man who had died. I remember sitting in this level of shame. It overwhelmed my soul. I remember weeping, thinking about this surreal moment that I was responsible for. They were asking me questions, interrogating me. In the middle of all these questions, a secretary came into the room. She addressed the gentleman. She said, "Excuse me, his father is here." I knew my father was right outside that door, and it was only moments before he would walk in and look at his youngest son who had caused so much devastation and destruction. He made a decision that would not only affect other people, it would affect him personally. When he entered the room, he looked at the other gentleman. The woman, the secretary, announced who he was. She said, "Chief John Mayer is here." Remember, I looked at my father, and he looked back at me. The men at the table were shocked at who my father was. He was a peer, a colleague, also a former law enforcement official. Yet in that very moment, as he may have been embarrassed himself for what his son had done, he walked over to me in this position. I remember looking at him, not knowing what he was going to do or say, and he kissed me on my forehead. And it was in that very moment where he showed me his absolute best, even though I was sitting in my absolute worst. I could not have done any worse than that. This level of shame had reached a climax in that very moment. And as I think about that moment of clarity, that moment of love that was shown to me when I did not deserve it, I'm reminded of a truth that is infinitely greater than that. And that's how the Bible says in Romans 5:8 that God demonstrates his own type of love toward us in that while we were yet sinners, while we were yet sinning, while we were messed up, jacked up, in shame, Christ died for us. You see, there's nothing you can do that can trump what God's already done. There's nothing you can say. There's nowhere you can go that could be further or deeper than God's love for you. God has given us his absolute best when he's given us Jesus. His desire is to give you that level of love, that it would completely overwhelm you, that it would push aside the guilt and the shame no matter what you've done. None of us are perfect, but the Father in heaven has loved us perfectly. Will you receive that level of love today? Will you allow it to overtake your guilt and shame? Will you believe that you are who God says you are, not what your mistake reminds you that you are? And no matter what you've done, no matter how far you've fallen or where you think you're hiding, you're never too far gone to turn around and receive God's kiss of forgiveness.